Hey everybody, it's Matt Powell with Convergint Technologies. Thank you for joining. So we are going to give everybody another minute or two to make sure that they're logged in. We can see as people add themselves. So we will give it another second or two, and then we will be ready to go. So we appreciate everybody that's logging in today. We've got a lot of learning. We've got a lot of things that we're going to be going over. We've got two incredible guests that are on with me. I'm excited to have them. So we'll give everybody another 30 seconds or so. And if you are listening in after the fact, then it doesn't really matter to you whether whether we wait, because you can fast forward, but here in real time can't fast forward. So we'll give everybody another 30 seconds to jump in, and then we will be ready to go talking about on-guard policies and contagion reporting with our good friends from JFK Terminal, the International Terminal, and Matt Moreno, our friend from LenelS. So we'll give it another 20 seconds or so, and then we'll go ahead and get started.
I'm getting a loop.
One of the things that you might do if you are listening at home is, if you've got multiple devices going, you might have to turn them off to listen through your headphones. I think we've all experienced this with Teams at this point. So make sure that you got your headphones on, but your speakers off. So far, I've really enjoyed Teams, except when it comes to doing live events. There's a lot of buttons and knobs and things that you have to adjust, and dogs barking and children screaming and everything that is the new normal that we didn't expect a few months ago. A few months ago, if somebody's kid started screaming in the background and the dog was barking, everybody was wondering when they were going to mute. Now we just all smile as it happens. So let's go ahead and get it going, everybody. This is Matt Powell. I'm the Transportation Market Manager for Convergint Technologies, and we really appreciate you jumping on with us today. We do have a video going, or you can just listen to the audio. I'm excited today that we have Chris Radman of JFK, the International Air Terminal, and Matt Moreno of LenelS2. So I'm going to let them introduce themselves in a moment, but for right now, let me do a little bit of housekeeping. If you have a question, make sure you type it into the Q&A box, and we will answer it as we go if it's pertinent right then. But we may, if we've already moved on to another topic so that we can keep this going, we only have an hour, we may keep it until the end. So if we don't answer your question right at that moment, we will answer it at the end. We do have a presentation that we will be sharing. It's not a salesy presentation. It supports everything that we're going to be talking about for you to be able to follow along with. But you don't have to see it to know what we're going to be talking about. So if you're listening to this after the fact and you're listening to it in your car as you drive down the road, whatever it may be, there is a presentation. It is important that you see it so you know where we're at, but you don't have to see it to know what we're talking about. Lastly, behind the scenes, we have our good friend, Micah Carlson, Convergent's Director of Marketing, and he's helping us as our maestro, producer, director, everything. So you may hear us ask Micah to move something forward. You may ask us, or you may hear us ask Micah for something in particular. Don't be confused. We're not talking to a ghost. He's back in the background making sure that this thing is operating properly. And also, last thing, I'm having some connection issues. We're in the new normal, right? So at a certain point, if my video goes out or something like that, we're going to continue talking until my video comes back up. But I'm sure Matt and Chris will have plenty to talk about. So let's go ahead and talk to our guests. Let me introduce our guests. So Chris Radman, do you want to introduce yourself?
Sure. Good afternoon, everyone. It's Chris Radman. I'm currently the IT Manager for Safety and Security Services at JFK International Air Terminal, or JFK IAT. We are the first privately run air terminal in the U.S. I've been in the industry doing this for about 14 years now. I've been using OnGuard with LenelS for the last, actually since the beginning, since 07, I've been an OnGuard user. At the airport here, managing everything from access control and CCTV to all the latest and greatest technology in our security operations center. all the bells and whistles that everyone's playing with today, video analytics, our PSIM technology, and all the various integrations that go along with that. A little bit about IAT for those that don't know. We are Terminal 4 at JFK Airport. All the terminals at JFK are a little disjointed. We are the sole facilitator or landlord of T4. We do about, pre-COVID, about 60 to 65,000 passengers a day was our typical, which averaged about 22 million passengers a year. Obviously, the numbers today are nothing like that, unfortunately, but we're hoping to get back to the new normal soon. IAT is a very small management company. We have about 108 employees managing a 2.2 million square foot facility. So essentially, we are responsible for the facility itself adhering to DHS, TSA, CBP, Port Authority regulations on the day-to-day. Delta Airlines is our anchor tenant. They do about 60% of our volume. The other 32 airlines in our terminal are our majority international carriers that make up the other 40% of our yearly volume. So I'll kick it over to Matt, and he can take it from there.
Moreno.
Yeah, sure. Chris, that's a lot of acronyms, by the way. Do you want to add a few more in there besides PBA, you know, maybe your PTA or whatever? There's tons of them out there. Thank you, by the way, Convergint, Matt Powell, and Micah for hosting this. Sincerely appreciate this, giving Chris and I the opportunity to talk about, you know, specifically one aspect of OnGuard, which is policies. But a little introduction about myself. My name is Matt Moreno. I am the Director of Aviation and Transportation here at LenelS2. LenelS2 is a combination of both the previous Lenel OnGuard access control system and an acquisition of S2 Netbox, which was back in 2018, formed this company and now being the #1 access control company in the world. I have been in this business over 19 years now. Coming on 19, which is quite scary to think about. Never thought I'd get this far in my life, let alone in a career. I'm really happy I did. LenelS2 has been nothing but the pinnacle of a career move that I had made. I live here in New York City. I've been with Chris as a customer in 2 iterations. Prior to him being at JFK, he was also over at St. John's running the OnGuard system there. So when he came over to JFK, he got married into not only to the same technology, but also the same salesperson at the time, and now helping me out with some things like this to kind of talk to the customers about it, et cetera, et cetera. So I sincerely appreciate Chris doing this for me. One thing that Matt had mentioned that we were going to talk about today is a thing called policies. And I'm going to get into the details of policies because it's very specific around how we run and operate airports within access levels inside of the airports. It's vital. As a matter of fact, it's a huge stepping stone for Chris as he moved forward within his expansion of OnGuard inside of those terminals. But how do you get to policies is a little bit different. And if some of you who are on this call have
Matt, can I pause you right there for a second?
Of course.
A couple of things real quick, everybody. Chris, how many doors do you have on your system?
Currently, the T4 system is running about 1,100 doors in our OnGuard system. And
you said you had how many employees in there?
So JFK IT has got about 108 employees for our management company itself. The terminal is run by about 13,000 employees daily from our various stakeholders, the airlines, federal partners, concessionaires, that kind of thing.
Okay. And one thing that I want to make sure that everybody, this is something that somebody just texted me, is that, you know, we want to make sure that we're going to cover a lot of lessons learned. If you're an airport that's trying to grow to that size, if you're an airport that size, I mean, that's a lot of users. There's a lot of access levels that these guys are going to be going into. And in terms of policies, you know, when we're looking at what we don't want to just talk about, and one of the things that I'm going to be doing is that we don't want to just talk about, you know, pushing things around in Lenel. We want to be talking about policies that work in general, things that, you know, Chris, you've learned over time that work and don't work in terms of your access control, how you're utilizing it, how it contributes to an efficient operational environment, how you've come to the conclusion of, you know, why you're using on guard and your access control in a very particular way. And so, as we get into this and you folks have questions out there, if you have questions, I know some of you don't have on guard. And Lenel is an incredible partner of ours, but you're going to have a lot of questions that are access control general questions as well as policy general questions. So don't feel like you can't ask a question because it's not about Lenel on guard. This is about educating the aviation market and everybody out there, because we're all in this together, especially right now as we try to do more with less. So Matt, go ahead and jump in and get going with it.
Sure. Just to also explain one thing that's really cool, even though Chris manages, over 1,100 card readers and 1,400 cameras, that is one terminal at the airport of a terminal of six. I mean, an airport of 6 different terminals, most of which is on guard itself. The reason we want to, and thanks for bringing it up, by the way, Matt, it's really important, is to identify how big these systems are, is because that's exactly what policies does, right? It helps manage not only just card readers and card holders, but how you actually manage the access levels and rights for those independents that you wouldn't even think of doing it as, let's say, a closed environment, because there's no such thing of that in an airport. You have so many different companies, employees, agencies, all running around with different access levels that need to be managed by somebody like Chris, that you need an engine behind you to do it. And that's what policies does. OnGuard itself is basically just an access control system, right? I mean, it does nothing different than many other access control systems out there, but this bolt-on, if you will, or this experience piece of OnGuard as an agent or even an intelligence behind it, running your access control policies, or actually, even though it sounds redundant, does a little bit of the management for you. So it's pretty cool. So OnGuard itself, like I said, is an access control system. It's been around for eons. As a matter of fact, I think we're just about to celebrate our 30th year this quarter, which is impressive enough. It's been through one major acquisition, and then we actually made some of our own acquisitions. But for the most part, OnGuard, as you've known it, has always been a beast of an access control system that was very feature rich, but was more built on an older type of technology over the thick client versus like a .NET type of architecture, et cetera, et cetera. In the new iterations, ever since the 7.2 versions of OnGuard, and that's not necessarily relevant for somebody who doesn't have OnGuard, we've changed that user experience. We want it to be more Web 2.0 type of atmosphere, or in a sense, the cosmetic components of OnGuard. And if, Micah, if you don't mind moving over just one slide, all of the features that have come within the OnGuard family of all of the OnGuard features that are into the thick client have now moved over to the web, right? And with the web, of course, it brings up the standard stuff that you've used access control systems for in the past, but we wanted to expand some of those things that we've never been able to do with a thicker client, and one being policies, right? Policies itself is a title of an access control feature or an intelligence behind how you manage access control levels and rights and people to give those rights. So really quick, broad stroke of OnGuard, all of the other components that were in the web interfaces. Of course, we also have our Blue Diamond mobile credential, cardholder self-service, our visitor management, entire suite of components within OnGuard that are now onto the web that we're sharing today. And as a matter of fact, T4 has implemented a lot of these today and using them consistently. So I'm not going to get into all of those. That's for a different time, for a different call. But right now we're going to talk about policy. So Micah, go ahead and move forward to the next few slides. Next one. That's just the title. Okay, you can build it. Thank you. So policies is basically a solution to manage access levels. It's an engine behind the wherewithal to know how to do this. I'd like to set it up in the sense of what it was like for video surveillance before matrix switching, or when matrix switching became involved. There used to be, this image of a security operator inside of a command center looking at hundreds and hundreds of different cameras, right? And on a casino floor or wherever it was, and that kind of became the norm for any kind of security operation or command center. We all know as security professionals that is not a good way to manage video. And in a sense, since the advent of IP video, we've realized that instead of showing thousands of cameras, that you telling your security operator to go find the activity or the criminal or the offense, we now bring video to that security officer. Well, with policies, it's kind of the same thing. Without policies, in the old days of access control, you had, in this case, thousands of employees, all with different titles, all with different divisions, all with in this case, in Chris's case, all with different companies and even different agencies, having to get through specific doors at specific times at any given hour of the day. Well, that's very hard to manage as a security operator, especially when some of these policies access levels need to be changed throughout the day. I mean, sometimes airlines change gates at any given time, right? And Chris can't possibly manage all of those terminal gates and giving it to Singapore Airlines over Delta Airlines for that matter. But what we can do is interface that with an HR system, right, that identifies where the title is and where they are, and in a sense have the policy or engine manage it for them. So with policies, it's going to be an engine behind that does it for him on his behalf. It's actually really cool, and we're going to show you how it's done specifically around above wing and below wing. But really, if you think about how I explained the old video surveillance, model of hundreds of cameras in front of a security command center, bringing it down into one now is usable way. In a sense, we're taking hundreds of different access control rights, right, and having based on title or based on credentials that they've had, or credentials in the sense of OSHA safety and whether or not they've passed different exams and things like that. We can in a sense assign the access level based on that, and it's done behind in the engine itself, not by an actual user doing the work for them or giving the user relevant information when they need it most to make those demands. So if we go through to the next slide, we'll kind of explain exactly how we do it within the organization of T4. So here's a really good example. I call it the below wing in an airport terminal. All right. So only cardholders that meet this criteria can have access, basically underneath, the wing of the aircraft where you load luggage, or if you're looking at, fuel and things like that. So obviously the first one is the background check can't be expired, of course. Well, how do you get that information from the background check not being expired? That comes from whatever HR interface that you actually have that you're using at that particular terminal. All right. Secondly, and it's an and an or, it's really important here, based on title, whether or not they're allowed to go down in that particular door underneath the wing. Of course, airline pilots, every airline pilot knows they have to get out and check the airline wings and tires before they actually leave. So they actually have to have access to get down there. So if their title is airline pilot and their background check hasn't expired, they are allowed to go down there, et cetera, or in this case, an engine mechanic, right? Or in Chris's case, senior security officer. All of those things being and or is what's driven by the policy itself. Chris, as a security operator, doesn't have to manage these whatsoever. The policy is managing it for him. And if HR makes a change, if Chris has been promoted to director of security, and that director of security is not allowed to go below wing, his access right to that particular area has now been revoked. Or even worse, if there's a background check based on an IDMS, or if there's other sorts of information, in this case, an OSHA requirement, or TSA revoke or a no-fly list, all of those components that are attached to this particular policy can also remove the right to that particular area too. It's absolutely vital that the policy understands where the data is coming from, making the changes in the field in real time so that Chris doesn't have to worry about it, and Chris can do what normal security IT managers do normally in an airport.
Matt,
Not a really a big,
let me
yeah, please do.
Because
Please.
You've been going for about 12 minutes straight, and I want to give Chris a chance to jump in. Chris, one of the big concerns that we always hear when we're setting up an identity management or when we're working with our airport customers for their access control is, how often do you evaluate the policies that create policy within OnGuard? Because you're basing all of this on something. How often, how do you get to the decisions? How often do you reevaluate them? How often do you do that?
So the question is almost all the time. The aviation industry, as Matt liked to point out, is a bit of alphabet soup. Every one of those acronyms likes to change, revoke different policies and regulations on AOA access or access into the sterile area, who's got to get screened, how they got to get screened, can they bypass TSA security and go through private employee entrances and that kind of thing, on top of our own internal kind of security policies from our corporate security team. So the answer to those things are constantly changing. And that's the biggest issue we had in our access control office, where our employees would go up to get the access levels assigned to them initially was, today we can do this, you have access, you can go in through here, policy change, we now have to have our team go in, revoke all that access. We might not have a way to reach out to all 13,000 employees and let them know that access has changed, but if we know the kind of department that they work in, the company they're working for, what their role is, we always know how to get them the access that they're going to need to get into the building. So I think to your earlier point, Matt, the biggest thing for us was as just about 100 employee company, we rely on partners to do a lot of this work for us. So how do I assure that my contract security company that is assisting us in the role of kind of frontline customer service in our access control office is adhering to the policies, isn't helping out a friend to get a bypass door to go around security so he can get into the terminal when he's running late in the morning. This policies allows us to alleviate all of those headaches as long as the management team on the back end goes in and properly creates these policies. It kind of eliminates that X factor of the human interaction.
So with you being a private company that's managing the terminal, a lot of airports have, obviously it's not a private company. Have you found efficiencies in the way that they bring those to you and you work with them? Because, a lot of times in my experience, when you have an airport and it's, public airport, it tends, until they switch the access control system or until they stand up a new identity management system, they're not reevaluating all the access levels. They're not keeping that efficient. So they're building up large amounts of access levels and all these different records. Now, I know you guys, the Port Authority has an IDMS in Telesoft. So the credentials, I believe they're coming to you through IntelliSoft, correct?
That's correct. So we're unique in a couple of ways. So the first point, I think to answer your question about the regulation first, I think we're probably receive a little more pressure not being the governing agency. We don't often have the leeway that maybe a airport authority or an aviation authority would in terms of when those changes go live. A third party kind of makes a decision for us and we're forced to comply. We don't really have a recourse to delay anything. As soon as the I's are dotted, the T's are crossed, we're automatically required to come into compliance. So that was one of the huge drivers for us moving to an automated system like this that has some logic that we can build in behind it. As far as the integration, we do not issue any credentials at all at JFK as an independent terminal. All of our credentials are issued by the Port Authority of New York and New Jersey. I believe they just recently transitioned to IntelliSoft. We actually have an OnGuard integration that's lovingly dubbed Data Link 2.0, which is a scheduled data dump several times a day to provide new badges, revoke badges, and that kind of thing, which is another project we have going on with Matt and his team right now that we need to improve the efficiency and the ability to do more of that real time. We're thinking policies could potentially play a huge role in some of that as well, in terms of identifying how a person should be classified coming over. If it's someone that's just renewing a badge, we can potentially have some of this data in the system already and get them going, versus maybe a brand new employee that's coming over that's going to have maybe limited information in our database existing, that might have to take a trip to the access control office and get set up more manually until we have a chance to capture some of that data. So to answer your question, yep, all the badges are issued by the Port Authority using IntelliSoft, and then they just use an OnGuard data dump to provide those to each of the terminals.
Okay, that gives us a little bit of, because Matt was explaining so much and getting detailed, but I wanted to make sure we had a little bit of context about how you guys operate, how you're different than a traditional badging office in an airport.
Sure.
Your decision-making abilities and so forth. So we had a little bit better idea. So Matt, keep it going. I just wanted to make sure that we had a little bit of that context there
Sure.
as you kept moving, so people kind of understood where this is coming from, because it is such a unique position.
It is a unique position. As a matter of fact, this is where I was going to transition really to Chris, in a sense of, Chris, all right, so you and I, we've been working together for so long now, and specific around these policies and how we built the engine for you. I just did the below wing example because, one, it's the easiest one for me to visualize, right? It's the easiest one probably for most audience to visualize, both as, consulting engineers and end users. But what are some of the examples that you use policies for today? And maybe even if you don't mind sharing what you anticipate using policy for kind of the future, the 2.0 of JFK IAT for us.
Sure. So I think we've been running policies for just about a year now, really trying to kind of get our feet under us. I think if anyone on the line here has ever undertaken the monstrous task of deploying a PSIM, for example, and really truly understanding that none of your documentation is never as good as you think it is when you start the project. We learned that quickly about our OnGuard configuration as well, and how we have ideas for policies that policies the engine itself can do. We just don't have our OnGuard system or data compiled in a way, or access levels created in a way that will actually facilitate that for us. So there's been quite a lot of legwork there to do. So that's kind of on our side, just kind of a resource limitation thing to slow that down. But a lot of our other policies right now are lines of compliance, as I mentioned earlier. So the manual security guard going into OnGuard and assigning someone who has a blue badge or a non-AOA badge for Terminal 4 or for JFK, and assuring that they do not get access accidentally assigned to them that will allow them through a bypass door, for example, that a AOA employee can enter through per TSA regulation, is one of our most critical use cases for policies. So that person with a blue badge is required every day they report to work to come in, and they can only enter the facility through the TSA checkpoint. If that person got access to the door that I come in through, as an AOA badge holder, it'll be a huge issue for us in terms of compliance and regulation. So that was our primary use case for policies when we deployed it initially, and that is working incredibly. So for the first iteration, yep.
Yeah, so Chris, so just for my own sake, because you threw out a lot of different acronyms out there, AOA, TSA, whatever. So on a typical day, an employee comes in and has to go through what? And you mean just to, like, hit their card on a reader, and then the reader, and then tell us a little bit about the workflow there.
So sure. Primarily JFK's got two badge types. We have an AOA or an aviation operating area. It's got several different flavors, but primarily it's ramp side in the aircraft operating area. That's someone such as ourselves that has work on the ramp, ground handlers, airline crew, cleaning facility services, building maintenance. Concessionaires, for example, would have no business being out there. So they're all internal to the terminal itself, working somewhere in the concourse in retail or food service or beverage. When they come to work, they're required to enter exclusively through the TSA checkpoint. So they have their badge as an employee screening lane. They walk up, they go through TSA screening just like a passenger, except they get to cut the line, and they come through and they report to work. I myself T4 has private security companies doing employee screening for us. So we still go through the same protocols we're required. We still have the same list of prohibited items, minus a water bottle. So luckily I don't have to pay $4.50 for a bottle of water every day. But we can enter that way through, enter the AOA, and come back into the facility that way. Huge issues for us with TSA if those policies aren't followed. So if I try to bring a buddy of mine from the food service crew AOA with me, that's a big no-no. So there's fines and regulation, all kinds of things that go associated with that. So that was the intent of kind of policy number 1 for us.
And it does solve the problem. It instantly eliminates the access, if you will, based on that particular day's AOA restriction. Or,
yep.
Okay.
So right now the way the policies engine works, at least the version we have deployed right now, it's a manual task for us to go through and occasionally run a query against, I guess, all the assigned access levels. So it'll pull back a report. We'll be able to filter through the report and go, okay, this is maybe for something less critical, for example. Obviously, there's no exceptions to the policy number 1 we just described, but if we have this internal door that's only regulated by JFK IAT, the normal Delta Airlines employee shouldn't have access, but of course the general manager of JFK for Delta is going to have access to the door. We can go through and grant exceptions to that policy on an ad hoc basis. One of the policies, or I should say, one of the policies feature enhancements we're working on with your policies product team right now in 2.0 beta testing is the ability to automate that rules engine if we so choose, and have the system automatically revoke that access within a minute of it being assigned.
Wow.
So that is going to be a huge improvement for us there. We're hoping we'll be able to keep up with the engine itself and not assign too much access that needs to be removed in the first place.
So that's your target, is a removal of access within 1 minute of the policy violation? That's
correct.
Okay, got it.
So by the time they leave that office where we were just erroneously assigning access accidentally, by the time they can really hit any type of critical reader, they're already been revoked by policies.
Yep, got it. All right, well, that's a nice target for us to hit.
Absolutely.
Chris, if I can ask you a question real quick.
Sure.
Because access control, it used to just be access control, but
I miss those days.
Yeah.
How did you find out about policies?
I've known Matt way too long.
It was built for airports. Explain it. I mean, yeah. It was built directly around airports, Matt. And Chris, because he was so versed and on guard, and when he got to JFK, when policies was a really a fully baked solution, he was the first to raise his hand and say, this is how I wanted to solve my problems. And then basically we went over the scope, and Chris, take it from there.
Yep. Pretty spot on. I think JFK IAT, you asked Matt Powell earlier how it kind of is for us being that private entity. This is one of those times we really feel like it is in our favor. We have a lot more agility and flexibility than maybe some of our government counterparts, and the ability to, okay, we know we have to enforce X regulation, but how we do that is really up to the end user. Where it might be difficult for someone like the Port Authority of New York and New Jersey to invest in something like policies, we have a little bit of more flexibility and a desire to be cutting edge and abreast of all the latest and greatest technologies. Being that we're such a small company, we really try to follow the philosophy of working smarter than harder. We work hard enough. We think we prove that in running 22 million people a year through a facility with 100 internal staff. But we really want to try to keep pushing that bar. So policies was something new that we could bring to the access control world, to your point, which was kind of stagnant for a while, and had many things that desperately needed improvement, at least from the operation standpoint, or the administration standpoint, I should say, on the back end of access. So when Matt pitched it, we were smiling ear to ear, trying to think of all the issues we've had over the last 20 odd years of running T4 that could be resolved by kind of a double check on our office staff.
Well, this is why I think the traditional airport model, and it's something that we talk a lot with our clients about, is that in terms of procurement and addressing challenges, and for everybody out there that's listening to this that is working in an airport, you know, the IT, when I said access control, used to be access control because that's what it was. And you had a ton of spreadsheets and you just, you know, you programmed it in there and you were done. And in a lot of ways, the procurement side of things, I can understand in the past when it was necessary to make sure that you slowed procurement because you didn't want to be on the bleeding edge of any technology. Plus, you wanted to make sure that when you had these old gigantic analog systems, you know, changes to them caused a lot of problems. But what you're showing with your ability to use policies is that the procurement side of things, airports have to start to adapt to the IT world. And when they see things like this, you know, be willing to go out and look at them and talk to, you know, us at Convergint, or talk to Matt Moreno, or call you, Chris, and talk to you about your experience with it to be able to kind of make that case internally about why having this is important in terms of operational efficiency. So I think airports, I think everybody feels it, but when they see somebody in your position using this successfully, one of the things I'd recommend is, you know, call Chris, talk to him. And, you know, if you need to make that case internally in your airport, first off, your access control provider doesn't have something like policies, then, you know, I don't know if you look at On Guard or, you know, you demand it in terms of operational efficiency. But the second side of it is, you know, call people like Chris, talk, you know, colleague to colleague, counterpart to counterpart about this in order to make things more efficient, because these technologies are moving so fast that airports have to be nimble. It's not like you're bleeding edge if you go with policies. You've got somebody right here talking about how they've used it. They've learned lessons on it that can help guide you along. You got a great partner with LenelS that has a lot of lessons learned on this. So I just wanted to reiterate that this is just another example. We talk about it all the time, that airports definitely need flexibility in the way that they test out technologies, they acquire technologies, that they structure it, and so forth. It's just another example. You've got a lot of operational efficiency from this that airports could benefit from. If they just, now that you know that it exists, now is the time to go out and, you know, call somebody like Chris, have a conversation with them, and see what you can do to keep it going. So Matt, I didn't mean to interrupt you guys. You're right in the middle of talking about it, but it was just so important.
It is. It's vital. And as a matter of fact, just so you know, we can show you how you can use policy as a pivot into the quote unquote new normal. We're going to talk about contagion reporting and how policies can really help this. But before I do that, is there any questions, Matt, in the field that want to be answered before we get into the contagion piece of this? Are you on mute, Matt?
Oh, sorry about that. I think we're good for the moment. Okay. Some of the questions that I've been asking is people have just been texting me instead of putting them in the Q&A. So I've been asking some of these things, especially for that one particular person that said, "Hey, this is a great example when my boss is listening to this to hear about procurement flexibility. Can you ask a question about it?" So I think we're good for the moment. All right. You know, this contagion reporting is absolutely incredible to me. I can't wait to hear you guys talk about it.
Correct. So there's really the beautiful thing about PowerPoints and presentations and things like this is that you get to tell people, actually, you get to show people what you want to show them, and you can omit things that you want to omit. And right, the beauty of this is that I'm not going to show you a report. That would be a colossal waste of everybody's time just to see data on an actual screen. So I'm going to actually tell you what contagion reporting is, and then I'll let Chris explain how he is using it in the terminal, and then how we can actually identify a policy around it. So basically, a contagion report is just that. It's a report of, let's call them badge holders that have either somehow been assigned an anomaly. In this case, they've been either infected with a specific pandemic disease, or they have the cooties, right? It doesn't really matter. The report is agnostic in that context. But the report is basically generalized coming from somewhere else, whether it's coming from an HR interface, or it's basically from the cardholder's manager, or wherever it is that, hey, my name's Matt. I just went to the doctor. I just realized that, I've been tested positive for C19, and I'm letting you, Chris, know as my manager that, I was on site yesterday working. So now Chris has to take that detail, and now he has to run with it. So Chris, what would happen then is you as my manager running that contagion report, what would you do with the detail I just gave you?
Yep. So our thing is there's no requirement that we were adhering to here. So this was just JFK IT's attempt at being proactive and trying to support our community the best way we knew how, which was just to be as open and transparent as we could. So for anyone, either internal or partners that shared information with us, it was not a requirement in any way, shape, or form. But when you guys brought this contagion report to it, my safety and security team loved it. Essentially, we took the identified badge holder, ran this contagion report, and it allows us to put criteria around it. So I want to know everyone in a clean, concise format of contagion person X swiped at X reader at this time, who's been there in the last 1 hour, 30 minutes, 3 hours, and you guys kind of built out a report that was scaled and visually astute for anyone not used to digging through long Excel files, and identified not only the locations that this person might have swiped, but anyone they might have encountered or who might have encountered a potentially infected device, whether it be a card reader where you have to enter your PIN and physically touch that card reader, or elevator control buttons if they were swiping in an elevator. It allowed us to make notifications to other companies and partners and employees of the possibilities of a contagion if they were there within a short period. We quickly parlayed that into the ability to target our cleaning services a little more specifically on any instances that we were made that we were made aware of. So of course, just like in the airport, we've heightened our security or sterilization services since the pandemic. The guys are hitting every area of a 2.2 million square foot terminal every 4 hours in our public facing areas. However, we realized that if card reader on elevator 101 was determined in this contagion report to be infected, we might not hit it again for another 3 to 4 hours, which might not be sufficient. So we're able to use it to target those cleanings and have that area revisited, for example, if someone notified us that they were positive for C19.
Chris, I just got a question that got text to me. What's the workflow to contact the cleaning service?
So I think it's just right now it's a regular old radio. So what we would do is our Security Operations Center, or our OCC from our operations side of the house, would just relay out via radio to our cleaning staff and be like, hey, this was just brought up. However, they relayed the message, but this is an area of priority as of this second. Redirect anyone who's in the area to hit this area, this elevator, for example, again, even if it was just hit 25 minutes ago. So it was nothing fancy or automated from OnGuard or policies or anything just yet, but we're looking to possibly do some more of that now, as we don't see this going away in the next couple months, as we were maybe originally hoping when we started doing this. If this is going to develop into something we have to do long term or could be around for good now, we need to improve that workflow. That is something that's actively being worked on right now.
And Matt Moreno, are you able to pull any trend reports out of that to kind of get some predictive data to say, okay, well, this area is getting, we're seeing it more in this area than we're seeing it in other areas? Are you guys able to do that yet?
Well,
I know I'm asking a little bit off the wall question, but this is
no. Did you say the word a tringe? That's a nice. That's impressive. It's a $5 word. Okay, so the quick answer is I'm not astute to know. I really don't. That's more of a Chris question. I mean, any reporting that you pull from OnGuard or any database for that matter, you could theoretically do some, analytics or just around them. I mean, we do it with one of our other components in our user interface, which is called Watch, which does look at trending right within card reader utilization. So if you associate, Chris, you use Watch right now, so you tell me if you associated some of the results of those reports with the tendencies that you see in Watch, could you theoretically do what Matt just described, which is basically look for anomalies that are showing in this readers more often than not?
I think the answer is probably yes. I have not tinkered with that, to be totally honest.
Yeah.
I think, though, what we would see, at least from my experiences in dealing with this for the last 3 months, is the high traffic areas are pretty much already known. It's going to be your entry points to the facility, your shared elevators and escalators, any entrances to offices and that kind of thing. I would assume that our data, anything we could pull from OnGuard, would match kind of all the trends that everyone's already focusing on in those high target areas that everyone's already put increased cleaning schedules around. But to honestly say I've pulled that data from OnGuard, just haven't tried it yet.
Okay, cool. Yeah, cool. Somebody texted me that and asked, and I've said, okay.
No, it's a terrific question. I mean, contagion reporting is so new, Matt. I mean, it's only going to evolve to make it more user friendly and be able to actually get business use out of it in this case, right? To be able to to make decisions. So real quick, the last piece of this for actually it's the last question I have for Chris is we talk about contagion reporting and how now the magic question is similar to one Matt just asked is how do you anticipate or do you think you could anticipate using policies as that engine to manage the details you're getting from contagion reporting?
Yeah, I think the question is just a relatively new one that popped up to us, so we have not executed this just yet. But our safety and security team is beginning to kind of try to develop the ConOps around it. And it applies to contagion reporting. That's how the idea came up. But then actually when we thought about the practicality of it, it's got a lot more use cases than that, is to potentially flag anyone that's used. So say Matt's infected with C19, he used elevator 101, 30 seconds later, I come by and I swipe at that reader again before it's had a chance to be sanitized. Can we run some kind of policy that could essentially temporarily deactivate my badge and kind of contain me to an area before I'm able to potentially take the contamination I picked up from that reader and scatter it elsewhere throughout the terminal? Still in kind of beta testing in our minds and concepts, and we'd have to do a lot more due diligence around that, and then try to see if we can logically create those if-then statements and policies to do so. We would definitely need some support from the product team there to try to integrate that with the reporting. But with as quickly as they've turned around some of the additional feature sets we requested in policies 2.0, and the fact that we don't see this going away anytime soon, we think it might be worthwhile to have the conversation with Matt and his policies product team.
That's two things you giving me tasks today. I got to get you I got to stop people from going in within 1 minute of the violation, and now I have to run your policy example and your contagion reporting. So okay, I got a busy afternoon.
The first one I tested in my test lab yesterday, and you're already on your way there. So
all right, so we're at what, a minute 3? I got to get down to 59 seconds. Okay.
So just while we're on the topic of the whole pandemic and all that, I think another one that just came up relatively recently while working on the beta testing 2.0 with your team, and unfortunately I can't take credit for the idea, but it would be to look at the possibility of doing an integration. I'm sure, like myself, who spent the last 3 months, I've been working from home, relatively searching the world for a solution for elevated body temperature screening. Is there a possibility to take any number of solutions that have an API, integrate that with OnGuard, and say, all right, my badge every day at the end of my shift is deactivated. It'll be reactivated the next morning when I show up to my employee entrance at T4, scan my credential, and approach our elevated body temperature screening solution, which will record my temperature for the day. If I pass the pass-fail criteria, which thank God my safety team is handling and I don't have to figure that out, activate my badge at that point based on the policy of passing the pass-fail from the screening solution, so I can actually continue to enter the facility. If that made any sense.
Yeah, a little. It made a very little sense to me. I'm sure to some of the airline professionals, though.
No, I think I see what you're talking about, which is if you've got, for example, with Convergint, right? So every morning we have to go in and we have to fill out our fit for duty, and go ahead and put everything in. And even though it's more designed for our folks that are going to be out in the field or in the office, I mean, it's not like I can lock myself out of my own house now that I work from home, even though I'd absolutely love to do that some days when the calls are too much. That I guess what you're saying is that when somebody badges out, that until they come in the next morning and they pass your fit for duty or whatever it may be, that badge is not reactivated. But you would have to automate with the API a way to either do it from a workstation where they say that they're fit for duty, or that you'd have to do it from a thermal with a workstation, something like that. Is that what you mean?
Exactly. Okay.
That's actually really, really interesting. Man, you're giving Moreno the $1 million ideas. He's about to...
Well, no, apparently it's been solved. It just wasn't my idea or Chris's idea. So it happened on the product management team call this morning. So that one's done.
Yeah. That one I will be the first customer to line up and try to help you guys figure out, because I think from a health and well-being perspective on what everyone's trying to achieve now, especially for aviation, and trying to restore that comfort and security to the passengers, as much as some might say it's just reassurance theater that we're putting on with these elevated body temperature screenings. There is a little bit of science to it, and it is just one more layer we can put on. Just as in physical security, the more layers, the better, at least in my opinion and the opinion of our health and safety team.
Yeah, I think the challenge is that when you look at these challenges, I've been hearing a lot lately, well, no more badges. I guess everybody's going to have to buy, a face scanner and it's always the face scanner companies that are saying no more badges. Everybody's going to have to. I mean, it's a part of it. We have to move beyond, let me see if I can get this next sale, and let me make a recommendation that no airport can afford, and cloud up and clutter up the conversation, versus having very realistic conversations like we're having right now about what are the capabilities of my access control, LenelS OnGuard. How can I use policies? How can I use Watch? How can I use some APIs to create a very an operationally efficient, sound plan to address COVID, and get beyond the kind of sales conversation of everybody trying to pitch whatever new wares that they have to hit a number every year. And this is why a lot of manufacturers kind of hate me, because I'll say stuff like this. But it's true. I mean, we have to have that realistic conversation. And I mean, right now, right here with what you're talking about between your product team and what Chris is coming up with, you're 50% of the way there. You start looking at, what other stuff that you have out there, pulling those APIs in and just writing that out. That's a powerful way. And that's something that reassures the public to say, look, when you come into the airport, we're doing what we can about everybody that's coming in, the traveling public, but anybody that's working, here's everything that they've gone through to be able to work today. And if they didn't pass these, their badge doesn't work. That's going to make the flying public they can't deal with the people around them in the TSA line, but they know that when they get in there, there's people. That's the type of conversations that we need to be having as an industry, and looking for where technology fits into it. And that's why the policy conversation is so important. And that's why I asked at the very beginning, how often do you reevaluate your policies? Who can get into where? Why can they? Because I think that's an active conversation every airport constantly has to have with a lessons learned type committee. Is, does what we do, just because we did it 10 years ago, it doesn't work now. So that, I think we just solved all the problems, and then Lenel On Guard will be able to integrate it in, and then you can call it
and Chris will be the beta for all of them, and then the
Yeah.
largest, international terminal on the East Coast, and we'll be fine. We just got to get the airline industry to start flying, back that pre-COVID capacity to really test it in real-world scenarios, and it'll be perfect. We're almost there. We're almost there.
I think we're going to get there relatively. I don't want to say soon. I'm an eternal optimist, but I think the more these types of conversations happen between the end user, the manufacturer, and the integrator, and the consultants, the more these types of conversations are happening without all the salesiness involved, and having this type of conversation, putting new policies in that can be automated, the faster we're going to get back to normal. Versus, well, we'll just throw a bunch of thermal cameras out there and that'll solve it. People are going to figure out real quick that's not solving anything. So
actually, hold on one second, Matt.
Yeah, go for it.
He has a perfect term for those types of things. Please, Chris.
I already used it, Matt. You miss it?
I heard it.
Reassurance theater term?
Didn't put it in perspective.
That's our claim to fame right now. Reassurance theater. That's what we're calling it internally right now. Just a little bit of show and tell for the people who expect it. Might not fully understand that it's not a catch-all, but as long as us in the background as the professionals tasked with doing everything we possibly can, understand that it's just an additional layer of security on top of our increased sanitization, trying to limit touch points, trying to go contactless for transactions and stuff like that in the terminal. I think the more layers we can put on it, the better.
Yeah.
But
well, guys, we have 3 minutes left. Is there anything that you want to that can be discussed in 3 minutes?
Wow, another new policy?
Come on,
no.
solve world hunger in 3 minutes. Come on, Matt.
No, but I will say this. One, I sincerely appreciate Chris coming on and just talking about how great LenelS2 is and the problems that we're solving for him. But in realistic fashion, I just sincerely appreciate your friendship to come on and talk to the market that Matt Powell and I serve, across the country. So, and of course, Matt, thank you for giving us the audience to tell our story. I sincerely appreciate it, and I hope that whoever's out there learned a little bit, if not just a tiny little bit today, about what we could do to help solve some of those problems out there.
And Chris and Matt, I really appreciate you guys coming on. My recommendation would be, we are a big Lenel integrator, and you guys are an incredible partner and company of ours, or company that we work with. So, I sincerely appreciate you guys coming on. If you're in an airport, you're working in aviation right now, and you want to see what the cutting edge is and what people are doing, the model that Chris has and that he operates in, it allows him to be flexible. Call him up, have a conversation, drop him an email, hit him up on LinkedIn, whatever it may be. If you're looking to learn about access control in aviation, or you're looking to, if you have an on-guard system right now, a bunch of our airports do, and you don't have these modules, give me a call, give Matt Moreno a call. We'll get you in touch with the right people to get you trained. Make sure that it's the right product for you and that you're going to use it right. So I really appreciate you guys. I think it was a great conversation. I think I've gotten a couple of texts, people have learned a lot out of it. So, if you're in an airport, call Chris. If you got questions about these modules and Lenel and how you can add it, give me or Matt Moreno a call, and we'll be happy to talk to you. And Micah, thank you as usual for making sure that this runs smoothly. And I think that's it. So
Awesome.
thanks, guys.
Pleasure. Thanks, guys.
Signing off.
Yeah. Have a great week. See ya.
Great rest of your week. Have a great weekend. Thanks, guys.